This is C.L.T.A. Welcome to Real Estate License in 14 Weeks. This is episode 14 of Starting from Zero. Today we're going to continue with Chapter 3, Title, Burdens, and Protection. And we're going to talk about title insurance and hazard insurance. If you like my video, please give me a thumbs up. And also remember to subscribe and hit the bell. That way you receive first notification of future releases of my video. We're going to talk about title insurance. Now let's talk a little bit about the history of title insurance. There are some states on the East Coast that they don't use title insurance. They use what is known as an abstract of title. So what is an abstract of title? Before there was title insurance, in the old days, people used abstract of title to research records of documents that have been recorded. So an abstract of title is accumulation of pertinent documents that was recorded that can be searched by a specialist known as abstractor. Now in California, we don't use abstract of title, we use title insurance. So for exam purposes, abstract of title is just something that is a practice on the East Coast. Now if you ask me why is it that we're tested, most likely you will not be tested, but you need to know what an abstract of title is. During the GRE exam, there are a couple of definitions that you need to remember. They are not significantly tested, but I'll put it in the video just in case. So what is a title plan? Title plan is just an accumulation of all the real estate transactions involving a property that the title insurance company make use of when they prepare the preliminary title report. That's what a title plan is. Next, the definition of chain of title. A chain of title would consist of a list of documents. It's essentially a history of all the conveyances and encumbrances that have been recorded against a particular property. It will consist of names of grantor and grantee. So if you have a continuous chain of title, it will show no breaks. For example, it will start with conveyance from A to B, and then B to C, and then C to D, all the way down. There cannot be a break in the chain of title. Whenever there is a break in the chain of title, for example, you have from A to B, and then B to C is missing, and then suddenly the next document is from C to D. You don't see the conveyance from B to C. That is a break in the chain of title. That means that there is probably a title defect whenever there is a break. So when you get title insurances, one of the things that the title insurance company will be looking out for is whether or not there is a break. If there's a break, that's probably a property that they will not issue title insurance for. That's the importance of a chain of title. What does title insurance insure? Some people have the misconception that when they buy a piece of property, if they buy a property that has title insurance provided by the seller, then they never have to worry about losing the title to the property. Well, that is a misconception because the title insurance only insures the title of the property all the way through the recording date of the grant deed. If your title is stolen by a forger through some kind of forgery, title insurance does not protect you against that. I think I may have mentioned that in the previous video. So remember, title insurance only insures the title of the property all the way to the date of the recording. After that, you will not get any kind of insurance. Okay, anything that happens after the grant deed is recorded is not insured by the title insurance. Let's talk about title policies. There are two types of title policy. The first one is the basic one that is known as the C.L.T.A. C.L.T.A. will insure all kinds of forgeries that occurred before the date of close of escrow. So if there was a document that was a forged document that the title insurance company did not catch, and the title insurance company went ahead and insured the title of the property, and if it was discovered that any of those documents involve forgery, title insurance company would have to compensate the insured for the loss or somehow make good on the title. The other type of title policy is what we call the A.L.T.A. What The difference between A.L.T.A. and C.L.T.A. is that A.L.T.A. provides for any property line dispute, boundary dispute between two property owners. So the C.L.T.A. does not cover boundary dispute, whereas an A.L.T.A. does. Therefore, if you are concerned about protecting yourself against any kind of property line dispute with your neighbors, you should get an A.L.T.A. policy and not just a C.L.T.A. policy. Okay, and the next thing we're going to talk about is a preliminary title report. Every time when you buy a property, the escrow will order a preliminary title report to let the buyer and the seller know about what's on the title record. Sometimes things like unpaid property taxes, any kind of liens, or recorded easements, those things will show up on the preliminary title report. So if you are a buyer, you should take a look at the preliminary title report. How many of you actually read your preliminary title report when you bought a home? I think the majority don't. Over 90% of the time you're okay, even if you don't read the report. But there may be a small percentage of the time, if you don't read the report, you might end up buying a property where there was an easement against the property that you're not aware of, and then you're stuck with the property. So it is very important to read the preliminary title report when you have a chance to do that. Next, we're going to talk about hazard insurance. What is hazard insurance? Hazard insurance will be things like your property insurance. When you buy a property, you have to make sure you get the necessary insurance to protect your property against hazards such as flood, fire, and things like that. I'll tell you a story about a customer of mine who bought a property. She bought a condominium, and it's a downstairs unit. One day, there was a severe leak from the upstairs unit that caused damage to her condominium. Unfortunately for her, she did not have a hazard insurance, so she wound up suing the property owner upstairs. But when you don't have insurance, you have to rely on finding the upstairs unit owner negligent who caused your damage. Otherwise, if you could not prove the upstairs unit owner was negligent, and all you have is that you suffered damage to your property, and so did the upstairs unit. Whenever you buy a piece of property, it is very important you buy the hazard insurance to protect yourself against any damages to your property. Now, in the example that I just showed you, that I just told you about, how much would it cost to get hazard insurance? Typically about $500. And she wound up spending about $50,000 repairing her property, which she could have avoided if she had spent the $500. Now, if you're a real estate agent, you represented a buyer who failed to get the necessary hazard insurance to protect herself. Are you liable for her loss? I would say from a liability standpoint, an agent does not have any liability for not advising her buyer to get hazard insurance. So as a buyer, please make sure that you get your own hazard insurance before you close escrow. Otherwise, you might end up just like my previous buyer did, having to spend a lot of money making the repairs where you could actually avoided all of that expenditure by spending $500. Next, we're going to talk about subrogation. The definition of subrogation really is not that important, because if you read the book, what is the definition of subrogation? Let me read it for you. It is the legal substitution of one party for another, the one being entitled to the rights of the other. I'm sure you don't really get it. Even lawyers don't get a definition. So it's probably easier I just give you an example. Here's the scenario. A man just had a party in his backyard the night before, and they were making some barbecues. Now, at the end of the evening, before he went to bed, he did not properly treat the charcoal. So he left the charcoal that wasn't properly treated in a barrel close to the fence between his home and the neighbor's home. Then what happened was a fire broke out, and the fire burned down the neighbor's home. So the neighbor who had insurance make a claim against his own insurance company, and the neighbor was able to get money from the insurance company to make all the repairs to his property. Now, can the insurance company of this man's neighbor, the man who was negligent in not properly treating the charcoal, can that insurance company of the neighbor sue the person who was negligent to recover the loss? The answer is yes, and we call it subrogation. Okay, so that's a good example of a subrogation. I'll give you another example of a subrogation. Let's say, for example, you park your car at the traffic light. It was a red light, and then a car from behind you rammed you from behind. Well, obviously the guy is negligent, but instead of making a claim against the other person's insurance company, you make a claim against your own insurance company. And then later on, once the insurance company had paid you, can your insurance company sue the guy who was negligent to recover their loss? Yes, they can, and we call that subrogation. So in exam, you will find some possible answer choices, and one of the answer choices is subrogation. So remember, the best way to remember the concept of subrogation, think about the guy who had a barbecue in his backyard and who did not properly treat the charcoal, and think about yourself being rear-ended by somebody at the traffic light. Thank you for watching episode 14 of Starting from Zero. I'll see you next time.